Great.
Got the karaoke going here.
All righty. So Eric Lent is our IT treasurer for the board. He has started the live meeting of the Old Farm District Neighborhood Association today. I believe it's Monday the 9th, 2020, November. My name is James DeRofi. I'm the board chair. We're going to introduce ourselves there in a second. Everyone should have the agenda. Here's our basic rules. If you have a question, either text chat it to Eric or myself or to the board or to everybody. At the end of any conversation, we'll ask for questions. The board's going to sort of be free flow during the meeting. And if we have any guests or visitors, there will also be free flow in on that as well. So Rachel is going to be part of the Cascades Transit COIC presentation. So that being said, board members, if you could please introduce yourself.
I'm Dave Johnson. Land use chair. Go ahead. I'm Dave Johnson, and I'm the vice chair and the NLA rep.
Eric.
Yep, I'm Eric. I do secretary, treasurer, and IT stuff for you.
Colette.
Colette Blum-Meister, and I've disappeared from the computer from my side, and I'm a community member on the board.
Jen.
Jen Sawyer, a community member on the board.
And we have somebody who's going to be joining the board officially this evening. Kathy, if you want to say hello.
Hello, I'm Kathy Schroeder. I'm a community member.
Okay, so we're going to run through a little bit of very short business, and then we're going to go to the Cascades East Transit. The very quick business is if we can have a treasurer's report.
Yes, we spent some money on Facebook ads prior to the election. That was promoting the candidate forums. So the receipts for those finally came in, and in addition to that, we're going to look at sharing space in a storage unit with other neighborhood associations. That price is yet to be determined. The Facebook ads were $118. We have over $12,000 remaining. Okay,
and Dave and I officially have brought all of our stuff to our shared storage unit. It's basically over by Crux Brewery, that road that you can't drive through. Very high security, 3 different passcodes to get into it. We are sharing it with 2 other neighborhood associations. It should be fine as far as what we need. Any board member that needs to have access, contact Derek, Dave, or myself. It is a true high security number boondoggle to get in, just so you know. But that's good. No one's going to steal our inexpensive signs.
And to get out.
and to get out. So that being said, we're going to do a little bit different order today because of Cascade East Transit. So after Cascade East Transit conversation, we will get a land use update. We're going to be discussing bylaws. We're going to be officially nominating Kathy, and then listening to other new business, and then a couple updates on the Southeast Area Plan Advisory Committee and the Neighborhood Leadership Association. So that being said, let's start with the Cascade East Transit update, possible routes, the future. Rachel.
All right. Hi, I'm Rachel Zockham. I'm the transit planning specialist for Cascades East Transit. And I want to just thank you guys for letting us come here and bring this route to your neighborhood for your feedback and just to kind of get some community input on what we're working on right now. And just for the record, I'm also an Old Farm neighbor. So happy to be here for that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
And you did introduce yourself. Please make sure you explain Cascade East Transit, COIC, all of that.
Okay. So, and I also want to introduce Andrea Bro is on this call, and she's actually the interim transit director, director of transportation, that is. So COIC is the council of, the coordinating,
Central Oregon.
sorry, it's the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council. It's a council of governments, and we have a lot of different services that we provide, from financial guidance and different kinds of teaching throughout. We have an education department, and we are Cascades East Transit. So basically we consist of a dial-a-ride service and fixed route service that's in Bend, and also the rest of Deschutes County, Crook County, and Jefferson counties, as well as the tribes of the Warm Springs. And also we have our community connectors between those counties and certain cities. So why we are here tonight is that we have some new routes that are part of the statewide transportation improvement funds. And one of them is a route for the Southeast. And this has come out of some planning efforts, including our current master plan that just got approved this year. And then also the previous one, both spoke about adding service into the Southeast area. And so we have been working on those routes, and the purpose of being here is to get some community feedback on how you think these routes would function and meet the needs of residents and businesses. Although there aren't as many businesses, it's more of a residential area over in the Southeast. So does anybody have any questions so far? If not, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so to start off with, this is a view of the route itself. And this would be Route 9. Right now we have 1 through 7, and then there is no 8 or 9, and those are the routes that we are working on building right now. So it would, and this is just a proposed route. This is nothing is set in stone. No construction has started. That's why we're here, to kind of get some feedback on this route. But this is a step towards what we are looking at and hoping to get some information from residents on. So it would start out up here at Hawthorne Station, and it would go south down 3rd Street. Then it would go east on Wilson until 15th Street, where it would go south. And then this little line that you see down here in the corner is where the Murphy Road connection is going in over the railroad tracks. So it would continue that way up Murphy Road to Perel, go back there on Perel for a little while, and that is Powers. It would be turning west on and coming back up 3rd Street towards Hawthorne to make the connection back up to the station, where you can connect with the other routes. Another thing to note is that this stop here and here represent stops that exist already on routes 5 and 6. So those provide another option of connecting to other routes. And over here on the west side on 3rd Street, those are all our Route 1. So the dots all represent proposed stops, but like I said, nothing is concrete right now. So how we got here is as I was talking about the planning efforts, we had open houses for our master plan where individuals gave us feedback on where they would like to see transportation put in. And there was a lot of talk for the Southeast neighborhood, but there was not a lot of actual roads or locations mentioned, which is one of the things I'm hoping to get from this group and the other neighborhood associations that we will be reaching out to try and just ensure that we are hitting the appropriate spots. So in December of last year, we had our drivers and other internal staff suggest areas that should be covered. And then we developed 5 route scenarios, and then they were narrowed down to fewer scenarios with 15 stop locations. These were then reviewed again and tweaked just a little bit based off of feedback. And in this summer, we had multiple Zoom meetings with city staff where we kept adjusting the routes and the stop locations. And then this fall, we are starting off by reaching out to you guys, and then we will be doing a bunch of the other neighborhood associations in the area that are affected by the new routes. We're also going to be at Hawthorne Station trying to get feedback, and by the end of this week, we are hoping to have a survey live online. So getting feedback from there too. And then design and construction of the stops will begin in the spring. And we are hoping to have service implementation in the summer of next year. So just a little bit of highlights about this route. Some places that it serves are R.E. Jewell Elementary School, the Bend Elk Stadium, the Ponderosa Skate Park. And there's quite a few businesses along Wilson that it serves. And then there's obviously a ton of neighborhoods. It will operate on 30 or 45-minute headways. That's still to be determined. And the main connection to other routes here is via Hawthorne Station. The main roads are Murphy Road, Perel, Wilson, Southeast 15th Street. And CET is coordinating with the city of Bend on infrastructure improvements, mainly the sidewalk. So there are just a few locations where there are gaps in the sidewalk. And we are looking to see what we can work on with the city to improve the sidewalk network here. So the vehicles that we have purchased for this route are a lot more small and nimble to be able to go through local neighborhoods as opposed to the larger streets. So if you see those giant gilligs that we have out there, those are not going to be what will be doing these routes. And like I said earlier, this project is funded by the Deschutes County Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. So this is just a little example of the land use market analysis. So basically what that shows is those colors represent the zoning or the land use that is being, that exists there in that part of the city. And that's a 1/4 mile from every stop. So that's what those circles represent, is a 1/4 mile from a stop. Shows you that we've got a large amount of commercial, but a lot of that is the 3rd Street and closer to Hawthorne. But what you're really seeing in the meat of this route and what we are trying to get at are these residential areas here that do not currently have any connection to public transportation. There's also a good amount of industrial, as I was saying, over here, and that's Wilson. And government service is like schools, so that's R.E. Jewell, and then we've got the senior center over here. So just some highlights for the demographics within a 1/4 mile of stops along the route. So our population is about 8,500, and that's about 3,200 households. It's also 3,960 jobs. The minority population is 19.8%, limited English. And so as you can see, there is a fair amount of people here that could utilize transportation, especially when it comes to people with 1-car households or car-free households, and people living with a disability. So all of that's just some demographics to show you of who will be affected and who we are helping to reach transportation by providing service in this area. So down the line, as the southeast area continues to develop, this route is also intended to develop. So right now it's serving just that area without that bottom line in the corner on the southeast side. So that is intended once development starts and that new school opens up there, so that the bus will come down here and there's a planned roundabout at the end there with Knott Road, and it will just go around the roundabout and come back up. And then that's potentially in the 3 to 5 year term, just it really will depend on population and density and how fast that's able to fill in. And, you know, when they're actually able to get the utilities in for that area will definitely affect the speed at which the density grows, and therefore our route will grow to incorporate that area. And so the picture on the right side is just, you know, a potential idea of what could get added in. None of these are anything concrete. They're just examples of and ways to incorporate future growth in the southeast area. So our next steps in the process, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing some tabling events at Hawthorne Station to try and get feedback from our riders. We have the online survey that will be going live hopefully at the end of this week, and hoping to get that out to as many neighborhood associations email lists as we can, and we'll be posting that on Facebook pages, and also hopefully getting it out into some media so we can get good feedback on what we have and answers to specific questions about the routes. And then the last thing is to be doing some more refinement of the route to try and get it to fit what the community says the needs are, and also further input from the city. So that's kind of the end of my presentation of this route. As far as providing you guys with information on the route. Does anybody have any questions at this point or want me to go back at all?
I had one. Will it be clockwise or is it going to be counterclockwise?
These will be running clockwise.
Okay.
Go to larger screen so people can be seen.
How do I do that?
Did you have anything else on the screen share? We can just exit that.
Yeah, it's mostly just questions, but I can ask those. There we go. So did you want me to go back to one of these?
If we can see the people, it's easier to ask for everybody to ask questions. You should be able to pull that up on half.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Eric, there's a way for her to have half of that, have that presentation be the one of the screens, correct?
oh, sure, I might be able to do that. Did you want to see anything on the presentation again?
I'm just trying to make, yeah.
I just had some questions on here to pull up,
yeah. Go for it.
but is there a way that I can make that part of the screen?
Go ahead
If
and
not, I
start-
can just exit out of that and I can just ask the questions.
Yeah, start the screen share again, and I'll see if I can get that set up. I think.
I'm just trying to make it easier so that people with questions, we can either see their hand or something or other.
And-
I'm going to ask a question really quick, Rachel.
Yeah.
So this is James. I'm the board chair. I do ride the bus. One item is, why go down 3rd Street twice? Why not go down 9th Street to go from Bend High through the industrial area to Wilson? That's first question. Second question is, Wilson's most likely going to get torn up for at least a year plus because the transportation bond passed. What are your proposed detours going to be for that year plus?
So I have to say, I really appreciate your first question, because that's actually another option that we are kind of still examining, is utilizing 9th Street. And there's some benefits to utilizing it. And one of them would be that you wouldn't be on 3rd Street, doubling up on 3rd Street as Route 1 goes on that same street. And the other advantage would be utilizing 9th Street, you completely avoid having to deal with the railroad at any point. Whereas if we utilize 3rd Street and go up Wilson, that could be an issue. So 9th Street is another option that we are looking at. And I was in the process earlier today of just comparing population and household numbers, and it's actually higher to utilize 9th Street as well. So that is something we're looking at. And like I said, these routes are not concrete. It's just something we have been working on with the city, and we do like most of the route and feel strongly about it being in the right direction. We just want to hear from residents actually and get a little bit more community feedback. So happy to hear you bring up 9th Street because that is an option we're looking at. And then as far as Wilson being torn up, so there is the option of going straight through the intersection of 9th and Wilson and using Reed Market if need be. That would most likely involve, though, a little bit larger of a detour. If we were to detour onto Reed Market, we would change the route just a little bit to go on American, most likely for that detour, so that we weren't turning against traffic on Reed Market there. If we go right, we have a left turn signal to go onto American. But American Lane.
American Lane connects on the other side of the train tracks. If you stayed on 9th Street and went straight through, you would come into Reed Market.
Yes.
So you're basically, you'd lose half your proposed route going over to American Lane.
James, James,
Yes.
the problem is that entering Reed Market, you can only take a right now. There's going to be a median there, and you have to take a right. Crossing 2 lanes of traffic to get onto the left turn would be a major challenge at certain times of the day. And also, if the train is backed up, it's going to have traffic backed up, and Reed Market's going to be totally blocked.
I'm just pointing out that, so that means the entire year that Wilson's down, the route will be entirely different than you're proposing.
So,
Who is speaking now?
that was still James.
This is David Stewart. I was speaking. I'm sorry.
So I couldn't say right now exactly which detour we would end up going with, and they won't be doing all of Wilson Road and a giant stretch of closing that whole 2.5, 3 miles there. It'll probably be done in sections like they do, so that there might be, a few months where we need to utilize a major detour. And then there are other options such as continuing up Bear Creek and continuing up to turning on to one of the roundabouts that's further east and then making it back. But I want to just overall kind of focus on the route itself and not be too concerned with planning detours at this point.
Okay.
Because detours are possible and construction can happen anywhere in the city at any time if something happens and a detour, needs to occur. And obviously we need to plan for those, but there are multiple options and it kind of will depend on where Wilson is closed and what's going on.
Okay, if that being said, as Bend continues to grow, I know there's lots of conversations about Hawthorne possibly being moved. I'm not going to consider that, but you may want to consider having the actual route go into the Bend Senior Center and creating like a little micro unit stop, like is at the hospital, where there's 3 routes that intersect St. Charles. And you could have it so that you could have the 3 little routes at the Bend Senior Center, as opposed to having basically 2 routes that are on Reed Market and then this one, which would go down 15th.
I absolutely want to, it's Kathy Schroeder speaking. I absolutely want to agree with James. I was going to say the same thing. The senior center today is going to become the Larkspur Center, whenever it's allowed to reopen. It's going to be big, but older adults in Bend do struggle to get around sometimes already. And if you went 2 blocks north of Hawthorne, you would get to the Council on Aging, which is another sort of services area for seniors. You might not be able to do that, but I think putting the senior center and Larkspur Center directly on the route would be absolutely crucial. It's a great idea, James. Thank you for saying that.
That's all my questions for now. Any other members, board members?
I got one. Yeah, echoing the desire for the Larkspur Senior Center to be an exchange or at least a hub. That would be awesome. On the southern end, we're dipping into a lot of residential area. One of the anchors there is going to be future commercial at 15th and Murphy. And south of that would be the park and the school. And we were looking at on the interim plan going down to Knott Road roundabout and looping back up. And then the 5 to 7 year plan was looking at going down Knott Road towards the UGB expansion area called the Thumb. The Thumb is one of the more distant development areas though. And before that, we're looking at the Elbow, the area east of 15th Street. And that's expected to have a heavier commercial presence, possibly with some light industrial, possibly with some grocery stores and services of that nature. Would we consider maybe instead swinging out that way instead of?
Most definitely. These were just kind of providing one example of options, but I'm actually on that Southeast Area Plan Committee, and I've been working with Allison a little bit on some ideas of what that route would look like if it went around more in the Elbow rather than to the Thumb. I just didn't want to provide too many possible examples for the years out, but there are definitely other options, as there are other options with this route, but I'd say that it's a lot more flexible and up in the air as far as the years out. But there's definitely another option that me and Allison drew on the back of a piece of paper that has it going east and back up north and then kind of cutting back over. So, and then there's the possibility of having it, you know, just be further east to start with when it starts going south. So definitely lots of possibilities of what we could do in the future.
Rachel, I had a
Just to
question.
clarify for everyone else,
Sorry,
there's
go ahead.
probably going to be streets that are going to have to be built in that area too. So we can't exactly plan that just yet.
I had a question. Are there going to be covered bus stops?
So right now, the construction is still up in the air because we have allotted 15K per stop. So depending on what it ends up coming out to as far as with putting in a pad and anything else that needs to go in, the pad and the sign and possibly a bench or possibly a shelter, it just depends on what the funding and what the proposed architecture and design ends up coming out to. And I think one of the goals also as far as installing our shelters is to identify locations that are high traffic and are going to be highly utilized, as well as locations that aren't subject to as much possibility for moving. So some of those places that are maybe in the southeast area a little more that might be moved once we expand the route. Putting a shelter in might not be the best way to go there. But like I said, it depends on what the architecture and design comes out to and compares to our funding.
Frankly, when I moved here and I saw that there were no shelters, I said to myself, Bend is not serious about mass transit. To expect people to stand out in the rain and the cold with not even a place to sit, it's an immediate turnoff.
I completely understand, and I 100% agree with you. I'm going to let Andrea respond to that.
Hi there, Kathy. I'm Andrea Brome, the Transportation Director. Just to provide some context behind this, I am working on a new agreement with the city of Bend that allows us to more freely work in their right of way. This has been a barrier for us to install shelters because it's technically not our property. So we're hoping by April 1st of 2021, we will have rewritten our agreement that gives CET more flexibility to install those shelters. So I'm kind of towards the finish line here, but I'm hoping in 4 months from now, we have solidified that agreement and that our maintenance staff can go out and actually install without going through the large red tape involved in working on someone else's property.
How many
This is-
shelters?
This is Dave Johnson. What do we need to do to facilitate that?
So I have actually today at 2 o'clock, we just finalized the new agreement with the city of Bend that will take place January 1st. Part of that agreement is an addendum to the right-of-way contract. And that is the piece that I am writing right now, where this group could show support is that if I do get pushback from the city on that agreement, I will reach out to you guys for additional support to push that forward. But I have pleaded my case multiple times, and hopefully we're going to be in a much better place in about a few months from now. We have actually plenty of shelters in stock. It's just that for many, many years, we didn't have the right to install them, not on our property. So I
Is there-
apologize for the continued wait period, but we're hoping in the spring of next year that that will be solved.
Is there anything that the NLA can do for you?
Yeah, like I said, I think if we receive pushback, particularly from the permit office, then that is where I'll probably reach out to you guys for support in showing that this is not just a CET perspective, but a neighborhood one.
Thank you.
And then as for the second question that's coming into the chat, all right, I'll pretty much provide a high level overview, but right now our hope is to install these routes and their stop locations. And with that, the city's obligation bond that was just passed for transportation, there is a clause in there that will provide the funding to complete pedestrian sidewalk, ADA curbs, and crosswalks to put it towards transit corridors as a priority, because that is where traffic is going. It is a bond that the property tax starts collecting in 2022. So the funds will not actually start coming into fruition for another 1.5 to 2 years, but there is funding that will be prioritized to these locations. To answer the next questions, with our sheltered stocks, yes, there are seats inside them. And how many shelters are we hoping to install? We have as many shelters as there are proposed stops at this point in time. We actually have them stockpiled, the county yard as well as our yard. We're just getting hopefully the okay from the city of Bend to install them.
Wonderful.
And yes, once the agreement goes through, we will have the freedom to actually do this throughout the city.
And this was Andrea?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, hi, Andrea. This is James again. I listened in on the MPO meeting last week. Was that you or Rachel that was speaking at that?
That was me.
Okay, so at that meeting, were you attempting to present a grant for funds to change the Route 17, and how will that affect that? And if you wouldn't mind explaining to the audience,
sure,
what that proposition is, because that will definitely affect this route.
Yeah, no worries. And it is a good thing. We're not taking away any type of service. We're actually adding, and Rachel was a huge part of that process. Basically at the Bend MPO, I provided an update on all things transportation. And we are going to be adding frequency along the 2 major corridors here in the city of Bend. That is 3rd Street. So adding frequency to routes 1 and 4, and adding frequency to the east-west connections of Route 7 and 3rd Street. So we've ordered 2 more buses and we've budgeted the service hours to begin July of next year. So we're actually going to cut the wait time in half during the rush hours of those routes.
I've got a couple of questions, please. This is
Sure.
Colette. First question is simple. Will these smaller buses be able to carry bicycles?
Yes, it is a requirement during our procurement process. They must have bike racks and they must have wheelchair lifts.
Wonderful, thank you. Second question is a little bit longer. Along 3rd Street, if they're heading north the bus route, that means that anybody that wants to go to one of the shopping center areas like Walmart or Fred Meyer's, they are going to have to cross 3rd Street, get whatever they're shopping for, cross back. Or how does that work then, if they plan on shopping?
Sure. And so we hope with the additional frequency that people are actually willing to stay on the bus so that they can be on the right side of the road for wherever they need to depart. I've also worked with the City of Bend closely on some of the new improvements with the flashing lights that they have on 3rd Street. So we just did the one at Hawthorne. We're underway with the one at Pine Brook, which will speak to the Walmart Supercenter there. So the City of Bend is working in some high traffic areas where we're finding people crossing 3rd Street illegally, not at a crosswalk, and they're actually putting in resources. So that is with the City of Bend. They own anything south of Franklin. And then ODOT is also working on a project with me. Anything north of Franklin is their right of way, and they are also putting in new pedestrian crosswalk safeties at most intersections where they're not there right now.
All right, there's no potential for these bus routes to go into these areas like they might be able to at the senior center someday?
Yeah, so that's a trade-off we discuss deeply in the world of operations. So what she's referring to, our Bend Dial-A-Ride system, which speaks to those who cannot take fixed route operations, we tend to have what's called door-to-door service, okay? The plus is that it's really designed for people who have mobility issues and can get them safely. The side effect to it is it drastically takes away from the frequency of the schedule. And so fixed route services are designed to come fast and quick with a slightly longer walk towards the stop. And our Bend Dial-A-Ride system is designed to really hit curb to curb. So if there's a senior with disabilities who cannot board our bus, we encourage them to use Bend Dial-A-Ride so they can be dropped off right at the door.
Thank you. Wonderful program.
Yeah, thank you. And then regarding the comment, sorry, I'm just going down the list here in the chat. For electric buses, I'll spend 2 seconds discussing this. There's various grants that we're going after in terms of an electric plan. This is something where we really need to partner with ODOT, Pacific Power, and the City of Bend in terms of the electric grid network here in Central Oregon. We don't want to be the sole person that sucks the power out when we actually do purchase electric buses. So there's some infrastructure planning underway, but there is an initiative statewide as well as ourselves that will be going hybrid electric probably in 5 to 7 years with some of our fleet.
I believe Jen had a question.
All right, when we go live for community input on this route, is the link available yet? So I think, Rachel, can you speak a little bit on this?
So the link for the survey is not live yet. It's going to be there by the end of the week. Just finishing up a few edits to it and translating it into Spanish so that it will be available to Spanish speakers as well. And then we will make that live for the public. Goals by the end of this week. So
Wonderful. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Comments?
I want to thank them for being here. That's
Thank
very
you.
helpful.
Thank you for having us, and feel free to continue to provide feedback. What we're most interested in is trip purpose. We want to make sure that this route makes sense to those that want to use it. And we also want to try to reduce transfers. We want to try to remove ourselves from hub and spoke and remove that burden. So if there's destinations either north, west, or east of Hawthorne that is going to drive the popularity of this route, we are totally open to those ideas.
This is James. Like I said, I do take the bus, and at this point, it is extremely painful. I live off of Reed Market Road. So if I want to go from, say, Reed Market Road to Walmart, depending on if I time the 45-minute to 30-minute connection, it's usually an hour and a half one-way trip for essentially something that's about 5 miles. So I know you guys know this is an issue. I just want to say that for the audience. This will make a difference. It would be if we could just start considering this the Larkspur Center as the first micro hub on the southeast side of town, so that when we eventually have a bus route that goes along Reed Market and to Mount Washington, that would be like the micro unit next hub. So working towards a future non bicycle hub system, but a spur system as well.
All right. Thank you.
That's all for me. Rachel, can you click us back out so we can see people? And so if that's everybody, board, should we wrap this up? Rachel, do you have anything else to say?
No, I just would love to get more feedback from everyone. And once the survey is live, would love for you to spread it around to any of your neighbors or anyone else that you know that could utilize transit. The more feedback we get, the better this route will serve everybody's needs.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And if you guys want us to post the presentation there, we can share that on our website, or links for feedback to the board. I would encourage us to draft a letter right now talking about those shelters. That's been one of my hobby horses for years here. You know, I was going to take pictures of the stools on 27th Street. Someone's out there putting those out themselves, you know, like.
As the new city council comes on, there's going to be their planning session in January, February. What I was going to recommend for our board in December is to come up with a list of items of concern, and we can add that to the list of items of concern. It'll be line, subsection, blah, 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 blah. Looks like you guys have one more question or comment from Nancy.
Hey, sweetie. Sweetie. Renee.
Yeah, so I think with regards to the increased frequency, we will drastically decline the need to actually cross.
You give me more.
So when we go from kind of a 30-minute wait time to a 15-minute wait time, more people feel comfortable boarding and basically increasing that frequency along the corridor so that they can get to places faster. I will say we're setting the foundation for what we call high capacity transit along 3rd Street, which is the predecessor to bus rapid transit. So we are building the foundation so that eventually, you know, in due time, we could potentially have a lane dedicated totally to the bus, but we have to show that popularity first. We have to show that increased frequency and the infrastructure along 3rd Street. So that is what we're building towards and hoping that we can eventually simulate what a big city does with BRT.
I thought there was talks already in the works so that on 3rd Street, the buses would be equipped with a light activation system.
Yes, that's one of the other 4 million projects I am trying to work on. Yes, so it's called Transit Signal Prioritization. I am already in the conversations with ODOT as they upgrade their signaling. I've also worked with the city of Bend to include language in their traffic manual that they are open to allowing us to have technology similar to the ambulatory services that will allow our buses to hold the green for them to get through it. That is probably a 2 to 5 year project out. As they update the signals, we then have to make sure our technology talks to theirs.
And as I'm reading Kathy's comment with concerns about senior citizens or just people with needs, who should the Old Farm District talk to specifically at the city or a code change so that we can request actual building codes on collector streets where there's an actual bump out for the bus to pull into. Because that's one of the big issues as we build the road systems that we're building. I mean, on Reed Market Road, I will sit there and almost get hit by people as they're trying to go around the buses whenever they think there's room. And I think the only way we can change that is with sort of more dedicated bus stops. What is your recommendation to make it safer for riders to get on and off the buses from a design standpoint?
So there's one positive and then there's one barrier that we're going to deal with. The positive is any new development. To put it elementarily, there's a box that says, did you speak to CET before you went ahead with your master plan efforts? And so to give you an example, along 15th with the Allen Glow Park and the high school and the middle school, I worked with the designers to put in pull-out sections for the buses. Okay. But it's easy to do that because it's brand new development. So essentially any new development that's going into the city of Bend has to reach out to CET to make sure we're part of the design process. That's great for all future development. The barrier is existing development. And that is something that, again, within the right-of-way agreement that we'll be addressing, that anytime, you know, a redevelopment is needed of an existing property, that we're also part of that conversation. And that's harder to get through, but we're working on it.
That's great. Kathy, do any of your questions need to be addressed specifically, or?
And with regards to the bond, so what the bond spoke to, the bond is solely capital dollars, meaning tangible things we can buy or purchase. CET was allocated $8 to $9 million for the concept of mobility hubs. That's a major win for us. However, because it is I believe a 30-year debt service on that bond, it is within 30 years that they will collect that $9 million. So in the grand scheme of things, that's a little slow. But my job is to keep tabs on that and basically apply for current funding that will leverage the existing debt that's coming in through the taxes. So that's also, James, what you heard on that call with the Bend MPO that we're also doing in terms of speeding up the process to get those hubs developed.
Okay. Looks like Kathy's just got a comment for the board. So if that's the case, it is almost 7 o'clock. What was the gentleman's name spoke? Is he part of CET? Who is
It's just
discussing?
Rachel and I on the call today.
Well, yeah. Well, I thought somebody had a comment about turning left onto Reed Market. I didn't know if he was affiliated with you guys or not.
Nope.
Okay, so if that's the case, it's just Rachel and
No,
Andrea.
that was me. I'm David.
I believe so. So okay.
No, I'm David Stewart, and I was the one who made that comment.
Okay, David. I didn't know if you were affiliated with CET.
No, I've just lived in the old farm district since 1990, and I'm old and I'm decrepit, and I share a lot of the concerns that have been expressed. And I think this is a good start. So I'd applaud where we are, but this just skirts our neighborhood. The old farm district's on the edge of this route. So I'm looking forward to what they suggest for the old farm district specifically.
Okay. Any other board member comments? Otherwise, we're going to say goodbye to Andrea and Rachel. Rachel, I think you're going to have to undo your primary screen and give it back to control to Eric, or Eric take over.
I thought that I had already stopped screen sharing.
I want to thank you for coming and talking to us.
Thank you much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Feel free to email any comments.
Yeah.
Okay. If that is the case, let's move to some of our regular business. Dave, do you have any NLA updates?
just unmuted. The NLA Land Use Subcommittee is meeting, and we're going to be talking to the builders and updating our position with respect to the code changes that the NLA has recommended to the council. And that's, I think that's going to be, there's one meeting tomorrow and another meeting on Thursday. So I'll probably send something out in an email to everyone after we've had those two meetings.
Okay. Karen, do you have any land use updates?
Nothing significant. The Eastern Master Plan we've already talked about. Jill wants a new cafeteria, and they'll be getting that. Larkspur wanted permission to put a sign on 15, 24 square feet with a very attractive stone foundation. I don't think anyone will object to that. Concerning the tree code, I'm meeting with Polish Homes via Zoom on Wednesday. They don't like my code. They want to talk.
Talk is a great, it's better than them saying we don't want it and just telling you to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cory Bittner. So we'll see.
A little land use, part of that Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting that Cascades Transit had last week. Robin Lewis has also presented a lot of projects around town, which doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a part of the Old Farm District, but it is what we need to be watching. There is a surprising number of older elementary schools and junior highs that are not ADA or kid-friendly safe to even access. And I'm not talking about from a distance, I'm talking about their actual borders. The two schools by Pilot Butte, there's an elementary and a junior high. I was horrified to hear what the kids have to do. Literally, they cannot get to the school except by car or bus safely. And they had, she released a lot of figures about the schools and even items like the assisted lunch programs, or where they even help with the kids in the summertime with food programs, that if it's not safe for the child to walk to, then you're talking about kids basically possibly going without a meal simply because we don't have a sidewalk infrastructure system on old major roads in this town. I believe that's only that goes through there. I think I can't remember what goes by that junior high, but it was pretty scary. So if that's land use, should we go to our new items? Or wait, Kathy, you have
I have a question back on the treasurer's report, which I started to ask, but then we wanted to do CET. Eric, do you know, have you guys heard if they're going to allow us to keep the money carryover this year because of the circumstances related to the pandemic and our functioning, or are we going to have to turn over that 12 grand for the grant purposes, as has happened in previous years with the budget for the neighborhood associations?
Yeah, so we had a fiscal year ended on June 30th, and we had a significant remaining budget from the previous, because our main budget items are holding our big general meetings in person where we have 200 people in one room. We didn't get to do that this spring, so we wound up with a large surplus. Originally, the plan was to have a carryover fund. That got a little bit tricky for citywide budgeting purposes. So rather than do that, they took the money back. The remaining money went back to the city of Bend, and they just allocated us a new amount. The new amount is actually substantially larger than our original budget last year. The entire year last year, I think we got something like 9,000. This year, we're starting with 12,000 plus.
and that's good until July 1st of 2021. Anything can happen after that,
Yep.
Kathy. We're talking whole new council, whole new ball game. It's really going to be how we use that money in the next 7 months and other NAs are. On that note, I spent a little bit of last week working with some title companies and trying to get Michaela's assistance to try to contact all the homeowners associations, not just in the Old Farm District, but also in the Southeast Neighborhood Association. I got a current map of the actual neighborhoods, but our contact list for HOAs is 3 years old. I do not know how to get any better than this or any more accurate than this. If anyone has any ideas, please contact myself or Eric, because if we can get them on our email lists and mailing lists to somebody that actually is going to read and view it. I know Southeast Neighborhood Association has a few more active homeowners associations, but we keep getting more and more on the Old Farms side of town as well. And too many people just ignore. They ignore what the NA has to say. They only listen to what their HOA has to say because they're essentially paying their HOA a monthly or an annual due. And that is something that we need to work on because they are parts of the NA, and any additional traffic or safety or bus systems or anything like that, they need to know about, and they need to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, and just rounding out the description of the funding, June 30th was the deadline for the fiscal year, but they did extend it by, I think, 2 months that we could spend last year's funds. So we took advantage and we invested in a lot of supplies. So when we are allowed to have in-person meetings again, now we have all the electronic gear that we need to have a robust live streaming setup so that we can have improved outreach. That's kind of our goal for this year, is creating a more robust outreach plan, spending a lot of this money to create flyers and collateral and materials and do work to reach the kind of people that we're not reaching right now. As we've got a lot of usual suspects, that's great, but we want to start reaching a lot more people. So that's going to be one of our focuses with this money. We're going to probably have some postcards go out as usual. We are going to have a big general meeting as usual, but virtually. In addition to that, though, we might spend to have postcards that are simply educational, letting people know that we exist and here's what we can do for you. So
on that note, Eric, so I've been thinking about this for a while. I had a conversation with Eric earlier today. I've chatted with Dave about this. Part of our discussion tonight is going to be on our bylaws. And when we start that conversation, which can be in a second, it's good. We're going to take about 60 days to dial it all in. But part of that, in order for those to officially change, there has to be a general or a special meeting with acknowledgement from the membership. So we'll be using some of that money as part of our advertising, possibly even doing a postcard mailing for the special meeting. And I guess we can go into that now. Yeah, Eric?
Let's just round out 2 more items on the regular, just so I can make the minutes robust. Do we have anything for NART and CPAC? I just want to give a reminder, CPAC has an open house that continues. The link was in our newsletter.
Jen, do NART.
Yeah, hold on, let me find the document. We had a big discussion about if we should increase the number of NAs or decrease the number of NAs and merge them, and then what that would take. I did bring up the fact that we have discussed sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Taking on, like when the elbow gets pushed, built out, like taking them on and showing them how to do it and taking them under our wing, if you will.
It's
Yes.
called mentorship.
That's it. Thanks, Dave. So we talked about that a lot. They were going to talk to their members and see what their thoughts were on that. I have not heard of our next meeting as of yet.
Quick question on that. What are they talking about with expanding the number? Is it simply that, or are they talking about reconfiguring how NAs behave in general?
No, not how NAs behave. I know there was specifically, I think, the old bend, the one that's in the middle that doesn't get a whole lot of participation. Talking about absorbing it with some of the more active one that's right around its borders. But it was just topic of discussion. What would be the easiest way? Should we spend the money on getting the word out about the NAs and try to build the board, or should we absorb some of these more non-active neighborhood associations and go from there? And then the chat was, would more NAs be more effective or just larger NAs? Like, should we? I didn't know what anybody's thoughts were on that either. If we should just be larger or if we should split up.
That's going to be part of the bylaws conversation.
Well, let me slip in here. There has been a designation of an NLA subgroup for boundaries, and everything is up for grabs with that subgroup. I think it's being pushed hard by Aubrey Butte, and the ABNA chair is pushing it. I am mixed about the whole direction of this because I don't know what the urban growth boundary has to do with incoming or redistricting or reestablishing NA boundaries. So I'm kind of disturbed about getting pushed into a process that doesn't understand that you just can't create a new NA. We have been developing and learning and growing since what, James, 2002? So we have like 18 years of experience in dealing with our constituents. And I don't know how somebody in the elbow or somebody in the thumb could come in and say that they do or do not want to be part of one of the existing NAs or establish their own. So I'm coming down real hard on the idea of mentorship. And I think that anybody that comes in through annexing urban growth boundary lots should have a mentor that puts them in contact with their people, but does it in the context of a neighborhood association. And then when they mature enough to want their own, then we let them go and they can do whatever they want to by their bylaws.
So if I can,
That's
just given
Go
some
ahead.
background on how the bylaw process works and the history of this, that was established in Resolution 2318 in 2001. And the way it works is the NAs define their own boundaries by articulating their bylaws. So what the NLA is doing with that conversation is apart from the legal process that already is established and exists for defining boundaries. Now they can do that, but if they come to any decision on boundaries and formulating what to do with UGB expansion areas, for example, that would have to be placed in Bend code. the process for changing boundaries in every neighborhood association across the city is through the bylaw process. So if they want to do something different, then they have to, I hope they recognize that that process, that subcommittee or whatever, is something different than what is the current legal procedure for dealing with boundaries.
And I have asked that specific question, and the question from the city attorney and from the group that's pushing for this subgroup. And that's the reason that I think that we really need, before all of this comes to a head, to go ahead and establish our boundaries through our bylaws.
Yeah, and I bring this up because it's become increasingly clear that some of these folks are just kind of making things up as they go without regard to looking at what the actual history and procedure is. Like, there is a right answer here, and it is buried in decades of resolutions. This is something that I had to research in depth, and it took a while to get all the source documents together, because even the city of Bend doesn't have a very good collection of this stuff.
I agree, and I think we need to move ahead and change our bylaws or adapt our bylaws to include the extension of our boundaries.
Dave, hang on, Dave. I have Eric and I have talked about that. We're essentially going to be addressing that this evening. Jen, I just want to say one of the for the NART conversation, as Bend rezones and redevelops or goes through gentrification of what is the Bend Central District, they're running into an entirely different issue than we are on the outskirts of town with annexation to the UGB line. They are trying to redefine not just neighborhood association lines, but redefine entire regions of town into what can go on there. And Eric is correct that there are, I mean, the Bend Central District, you're going to literally see that old Les, or what is Les Schwab now, that's going to get torn down. It's going to get built, turned into something else. The strip club, it's going to get torn down, turned into something else. All around crux. That's all good. I mean, if it's not torn down now, it's going to be built into something else. So I think they're having to try to figure out how to address that. And I don't think anyone has an actual answer that is in that immediate area. You have people outside of other areas, other NAs trying to resolve that as a major issue.
So what, are they going to try to make Bend Central District, like the Bend Central District, its own entity? Is that what I'm hearing you say? Like, are they gonna?
It's not that it's going to become its own NA for tax purposes and zoning purposes and regulation purposes. The Bend Central District is becoming its own entity.
It's gaining its own identity. It doesn't have legal authority aside from potentially like the TIF, the tax increment financing area. There's things like that that have legal force, but that only applies to its specific domain, like taxing purposes. That doesn't give them a definition as a neighborhood, but it is shaping an identity that once people start living there, then it would probably make sense to reshape the boundaries and make that into its own neighborhood.
Or a developer comes in and puts a 6-story tall, 1 block by 1 block condominium complex with buildings. Until it's all done and sold, that one developer is going to be the tax property individual that's speaking to and for the city regarding that spot.
And that's what I was going to bring up next with regards to the UGB and the mentorship model. From what I've seen from communications from city staff who are kind of, it seems like, misunderstanding how this works. They're saying that that's outside of city boundaries, so you can't have it as part of an NA. But as far as like CPAC, you know, there is city business to conduct there. Master planning issues, there is city business to conduct there. That is of interest to the neighborhood association. So that's why I say the boundaries go out that way. And that is
Hang
what,
on, Eric. So
no,
you
no,
want
so I'm just establishing a precedent before we get into the conversation about the details. We need the philosophical foundation for this.
Well, I
So
was just
the
gonna
one
say,
thing that's going to be important for the next city council is that is going to be captive to certain stakeholders. Like you said, the developer, before there's people living there, the developer is going to be the person who's speaking for that new empty NA. So if we have the Elbow getting developed and the Stevens Road tract getting developed, who speaks for that area if that becomes its own NA, or if it's left in limbo?
I dig what you're throwing down.
The person who speaks for that is the person who owns it, which would be the developer. And that doesn't really get to points of equity and, you know, ensuring that all voices are heard at the table.
So do we need to grab the city council while they're fresh and like whip them into submission? Like listen to us,
that
please?
document I proposed that we come up with in December of items that we need the new city council to look at. That's one of the other items on there.
Yeah. So I'm offering that as background because we're about to talk about the bylaws, and our first step is establishing boundaries that are clear in the bylaws, and then go from there. Expect some pushback from these folks who haven't read the bylaws, the 20 years worth of bylaws in this town and the resolutions establishing the NAs. They might try offering some pushback, but this is the perspective that I'm sharing.
Wouldn't it be just easy enough to send them a flippin' copy and say, get caught up? It's not
I'll put it on the website.
Responsibility?
So the Southeast area plan, they've got one more meeting on December 3rd. Everybody remember, they are technically still outside of Bend city limits. They're inside the UGB. They technically need to be annexed before the city code and everything starts to affect them. Those property owners have to choose to be annexed. The law has changed in the last 20 years. That being said, we need to go into the bylaws because part of the bylaw rewriting has to do with our southern boundary. And for all the audience members and all for the board members, here's how we're going to do this. Today, since we've been chatting about this and working on this quietly for about a year, we're going to put up what Eric has done on Google Docs, which has the old bylaws with all the corrections and new concepts on it. We're going to chat about it today, hopefully come to some resolution. Then we're going to, whatever we agree upon, we're going to send out to everyone in the Old Farm District that we have a email address and ask for comments for 30 days. In December, we're then going to see if there's any comments, see if there's any other changes or corrections we need to do. And in January, our January meeting is going to have a special meeting. It's going to be designated a special meeting per our old bylaws or our current bylaws. At that meeting, we have to have at least 10 people there other than the board to vote on the new bylaws or the changes. That will be 60 days of people able to look at, view, comment on what we're trying to come up with and make the changes. During those 60 days, we are going to be advertising. We might send out postcards. We might even use our A-frames. That's all decisions we need to make before or at the December meeting. So all the board, are we all on the same page? What's happening with the bylaws over the next 60 days and how we're going to do this? Okay. So if that is the case, we have a few
Do we
members
have any idea about HOAs in the CPAC?
There are none.
Because that's been one of our biggest stumbling blocks in the stuff that we do in our current boundaries is the homeowners association.
So the annexation In order, so after somebody agrees to be annexed by the city, they then get to decide whether or not they want to be part of the NA, is our current bylaws. Right now, the entire elbow is basically a bunch of single property owners. I think it's 32 property owners. The Easton development is still currently is part of the city of Bend. And right now, that developer is the voice of that piece of land and that property owner. So after that development goes on, depending on how we finalize this, that's probably going to become part of the old farm district if we just look historically how the boundaries were written. And we're going to decide on that verbiage tonight. If any of the people that are listening have any questions, send them through chat. We will address them today. But like I said, as we do our changes today, we're going to then send them out and ask for 30 days of public comment before we say, okay, this is what we want to do. And then give it another 30 days before we put it to an old farm district and neighborhood association vote at a special meeting, which will be our January, at our regular January meeting time. Okay. All right.
All right, I'm going to share the screen with the bylaws here. I posted the link in the chat as well.
I have one quick comment, James, which is, as far as I can tell, bylaws are a giant yawn for almost everybody except the board. And so if I were going to spend time and money on publicity, I don't know that I would focus on bylaws, because the direct connection between bylaws and what we're doing is so obscure for most people, they don't give a care.
Well, here's my take on it. We have to give, normally this would have been addressed at a general meeting with 200 people present. So since we don't have that ability, I'm trying to have it so that there's at least 30 to 60 days that we've requested public comment period, because there is going to be some pushback from certain people at the city or at other NAs. From what Michaela has said, they are going to be addressing the boundary issue and the bylaw issue essentially in the summer of next year. We need to have it all dialed in for what we think is it should be before they start throwing out different ideas of change. If you like, we can, the only other topic for tonight is we have the bylaws and welcoming you onto the board, Kathy. And that's got to just go through a simple board vote. So I was just going to do that last. Like I said, bylaws are dull. They are boring. We've been working on these for a year, and a lot of it has to do with the development of the elbow and operating completely virtually, which has sort of changed how we've had to do things. And for instance, our fall general meeting, the candidate forum qualified for that. So
James, I think it's great what you're doing. I just don't want anybody to be disappointed if we don't hear very much from the general public, because most of the general public is not that into bylaws, in my experience.
I understand that. And in January, we have to have at least 10 or 12 other people. And them are, if we only get 10 people that sign on, I know Kim's listening. I'm sure he'll listen, and he'd be willing to sit in on that meeting and vote yay or nay or offer his opinion. And I can easily think of 20 other people. I'm just trying to be fair and equal and have it so that the city and the NLA, or, we have it dialed in for the new city council. That is what we need to have done.
Let's go ahead and vote on Kathy as a board member.
Somebody offer a motion to make Kathy Schroeder the newest board member.
So moved.
Huh?
So moved.
Okay, so we've got two. Board thumbs up, yay. Eric, for the notes purposes, all board members here. Kathy is the new board member. She is replacing Beth Larson, who has stepped down. Okay. Hi, Kathy.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
So now you get to vote. So Eric, back to the bylaws. Anytime.
It looks like he left.
No, he's here. Okay, Eric, since you have control of the screen, I'm going to let you go through this. If any board member has questions, stop. We've all commented through emails over the last few months. And to be honest with you, there's 4 or 5 people in the audience. If any of you have a comment, get it out now. I'd appreciate it. Eric, take over.
Yeah, sure thing. Let's see. I can't see the chat right now, so James, let me know if we get comments, but I'm gonna just get into this and we're gonna do a big overview. The big piece is the boundaries. That is the last item here. And we have a few other pieces that essentially it's modernizing the bylaws. It's getting things up to speed, removing things that we just don't do that way anymore. So with that in mind, we'll just scroll through here. Hopefully it's large enough that everyone can see. Let me know if there's issues there. The link is also in the chat.
Can I ask
Ben's got his glasses on.
a crazy question to start?
Sure.
We have more letters than anybody else in our abbreviation because we have the word district in the middle. Have we ever thought about just being the Old Farm Neighborhood Association?
Never had that question before. I don't actually know how they all got named originally, to be honest with you.
I don't either, but I just thought I would bring it up because we have many letters and I always forget the D in the middle.
And Kathy, I'm right with you, and I have felt the same way about it. But I figured, well, everybody seems to be okay with it. But if it's up for a vote ever, get rid of the D and.
Kathy, I guess the board and many people that started it and went to about 5 years ago, what is now a neighborhood getting built? There used to be this old barn that the people started to tell time as it slowly fell down at the corner of 15th and Reed Market. And that sort of was the symbol of the old farm district disappearing. So that's just a little history there. It's not happy history. It's just reality. That barn's gone and that neighborhood's flying in, and the transportation bond is going to be a big overpass by that railroad. So if the city and the NLA in 7 months decides to rename and rebroker everything, fine, we can come up with a cute name. I think that we can rename ourselves.
Yeah, we can.
We can, and for that, I would definitely want to have significant input. And if anything, I'd like to wait until we have a in-person general meeting where we can have 200 people there. I don't even want to. The likelihood will irk a lot of people will be great. And if I have 150 people vote on it in person, I'll feel a lot better before the tomatoes get thrown at me.
Okay.
Okay, so the current bylaws are from April 2012. So that's 8 years old now. And the style here follows kind of legislative notation where you strike through pieces that are being removed, underline pieces that are being added. I'm also highlighting them here so as you skim, you can quickly catch them. First up, we have the word livability. That's just kind of a loaded word. So we're changing it to quality. Not anything really substantive there. We're also making sure to add that the Old Farm District Neighborhood Association will do business with entities apart from the city. We're going to talk to the Parks District and the school district, HOAs and PTAs. So we have this extra line added here. Moving on. In the establishing clause here, that it is recognized by the city of Bend, this goes back to old language. As a government recognized entity, we shy away from politics, but we are distinct from the government, so we can take positions. For example, on the bond, that was a ballot measure. So we're just making explicit there, adding ballot propositions. Getting to membership, and we go down. I try to include explanations here to make clear what's going on. The old way things were done was membership was recorded on pieces of paper. People submitted their phone number, email address, and so on. Those lists go back to 2003 and are in no way remotely accurate anymore. For the purposes of voting, though, we still want people to attest to being eligible to vote.
So Eric,
yeah,
I would suggest you add the words by signature based on the explanation you provided. And I would have sent you these things earlier, but I asked you if it was appropriate and you didn't get a chance to answer me, so I didn't think I should chime in. But members should attest to their qualification by signature prior to any vote of the general membership and provide their qualifying address. Makes it really clear what we're saying. You don't have to hold up your hand or anything. You just have to sign a piece of paper, and I think that's better.
How do we do that virtually?
Well, that was going to be another question that I had, because I wasn't sure if we were going to have a voting meeting virtually, but it sounds like from tonight's discussion that you are planning to.
We have to.
Well, you
Okay,
know,
so
I suggested when I sent my responses, everyone signs in and they give their email address. The top of every piece of paper, we have a phrase saying that they are attesting that in fact the address they're giving is where they live.
Yeah.
And so you've got their signature and you've got them affirming their address.
So
yeah,
Eric,
that's the idea going forward. When we get back to in-person, our general meetings typically have a sign-in sheet, and we have one for members and non-members. Non-members just sign in, give your contact info if you want emails from us. If you're a member and we are holding a vote that night, we'll have a special sign-in sheet that includes a spot for your address and signature, and that will have the effect of attesting to your eligibility. Now, we can always go back and verify that if there are problems, but the City of Bend also recognizes that you can sign things electronically, and we can set up a registration form in advance, given that we're doing a 2-month notice prior to this vote. So we can ask that members planning to vote register in advance, and their registration has the effect of being a signature or an attestation to that effect.
So Kim in the chat section says that basically it's similar to what Karen has said. When people sign on, at that point they're attesting that they can vote, but we just have to come up with some sort of declaration at the beginning.
There's also third-party tools that we can use, kind of like survey platforms, where it has like petition type platforms, and when you answer the question, before you answer that, you have to sign in and check a box saying that I recognize that this is, I accept that this registration serves as my signature.
do you want to further modify this to say members shall attest to their qualification by physical or online signature, so that you cover the online basis like that?
I think that's an established convention, honestly.
Okay.
I'll defer to the lawyers among us, but I think it's established that you can have a checkbox or something saying that I understand this serves. I just renewed my rent lease by checking a box like that. So yeah.
Okay.
On to the next. So a lot of things are still as they are. Membership meetings here. This is just kind of clarifying the language. Some of it was just muddled, talking about the board of members. That's not a thing.
Hey man, we worked hard on this 8 years ago.
It said that the OFDNA website was provided by the City of Bend. It no longer is. We provide it ourselves. And then just clarifying the notification requirements. What we want here is to ensure that we have a reasonable notice period and an extended notice period. It's taking out the specific mention of email, telephone, and so on, so that as things change, if our postcard money goes away, then we can use our website, and that checks the box. If postcards are delayed because the mail service is bonkers in a pandemic or whatever, that wouldn't demerit us because we have met a different standard of reasonable notice. So what this is
Eric,
doing is
here's a
giving us
thought.
flexibility.
Instead of website, say digital or physical communication.
Let's see. So we have other methods deemed reasonable. So
Okay.
the website is mandatory, that's a shall. But then other methods deemed reasonable is where we would use postcards, newsletter, and every tool available to us.
Okay.
But, it must be on the website. That is the non-negotiable.
You
I
wanna
just
say
have to remind a lot of the board that a lot of these rules at the time, we changed them because of a lawsuit by one of Karen's old neighbors. So that is sort of where some of the history is on this. And yes, they need to be modernized. We're doing well.
Do we want to specify the newsletter in that section as well? Since that seems to be an integral part of your all's communication strategy.
That's where Eric's saying other methods deemed reasonable.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wondered if we wanted to call that out specifically, so we're holding ourselves to two things, but if not, that's fine. Just a question. Eric, are you going to shoot me if I go back up to section 2 for 1 second?
Okay. Article 2 or?
Article 2, section 2, membership voting. In the current situation where nobody's seeing anybody in person, and in other situations where people just show up in in-person meetings, this designate in writing one representative as the voting member. Do you want to say anything about it in writing or via email? And do you want to say anything about in advance? Are you worried about ever having a meeting that's controversial and having somebody from a group of people from businesses show up and throw down some, note that they say is from somebody else and then vote on something in a way that that you can't predict or control because it's not in advance? And do you care if people email you instead of just is in writing cover email? So I actually do play a lawyer on TV. so that's why I just wondered about.
That's a good one. I'm gonna leave that as a comment so I can come back and refine the language. But yeah, we'll have that settled in time for next month's ratifying meeting.
Okay.
But yeah, that
Preliminary
makes sense.
ratification.
That's totally fine. And I only bring these up for your consideration. There's nothing. I'm only bringing them up so we can think about them, not because I feel like I have an agenda.
That's a good call.
Yeah, Kathy, a lot of this is historically not just Old Farm District, but some of the other NAs.
Right.
There's a question of how specific do you want to be and how general do you want to be? Historically, we tried to be very general because we didn't want somebody to come in and say, oh, they're excluding us. This is just history to the board. And yes, however, Eric, and we'll continue to chat about this over the next few days outside of the board meeting. But that's sort of one of the challenges. We don't want to piss anyone off.
Okay, totally fine. I'm just bringing stuff up from what I know before.
No, please do. Karen, you guys are both the attorneys that I never went to law school for. I just watch one on TV.
That's right. I'm an MBA. I'm not an attorney. I just pretend to be one.
Wow.
So moving down, quorum rules. This is another one where we're kind of fixing the grammar. There was conflating of general and special and word choices. And then the big piece here is eliminating proxy voting. Proxy voting is illegal. So we're just striking that out. If you can't make the meeting, then, you know, sorry.
That's how I got elected.
You were there.
Yes, and I had the proxies from 8 or 10 of my neighbors.
We didn't count those votes.
I know.
So a lot of this is kind of routine and it's going to stay the same as it is. One big question as we talk about boundaries, though, is expanding the board. It's currently defined as 7 members, and we can define it as any number that we like. But I offer no fewer. That could be clunky. I don't know.
No, I think that's very good. But one thing I noticed is I do not see any, maybe I missed it, but I don't see any formal definition of a quorum for the board. And I don't know if you want to establish that in the bylaws or not.
I think it is established as a majority.
I thought it was 4.
Yeah.
7, and if it's a majority, it is 4. But does it say that anywhere? Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see it.
Board of Directors. I think we're gonna get there in a sec.
Okay.
And it's section 4,
Yeah.
but I don't think it says 4.
Vacancies. Here we just have clarifying language. And meetings. Open session, a majority of members shall constitute quorum.
Where is that?
Section 6.
Okay, thank you.
I'm pretty sure I remember this Monty Python skit.
Uh-oh.
The number shall be 4, and 4 shall be the number. It shall not be 3. It could be 5.
So the next section here, removal of a board member. I'm leaving that as is for the most part. These are always kind of just clunky because you don't want to make it hard for people to do it. But at the same time, you don't want to invite frivolous action that stymies the board from acting. So the problem here is it says 10% of the membership, but if you remember, our membership lists are decrepit and ancient.
Clever solution.
So
my only question on this one, Eric, is what about unregistered illegal immigrants who live within our border? And do we,
Citizenship is not necessary to be a member of the neighborhood association.
No, but if you are saying that 10% of the registered voters within OFDNA's, see, I can never get the D, boundaries, then it is.
So yeah, so it shouldn't be registered voters. It should be registered Old Farm District members.
no, so that's the problem is
We don't have membership.
we don't have membership as such. And then we don't have statistics that are clear and updated. We have tax lots, but those aren't people.
Attestated residents, people who signed that they reside at 27th Street or whatever. Is that a way
I
to do
haven't
it?
been able to get stats like that. I mean, apart from, we could go based on how many people attended our last meeting or a general meeting or something like that. That's similar to like how many people, voted for the governor in the prior election is the threshold for a recall against the governor.
That
I like the idea of using the prior meeting because that's the most current records and it's going to be in writing. And I think that's a good idea.
Well, the problem there is we have those vary from 60 to 200 people. So it's extremely variable. If we're having a meeting in virtually and there's not being a vote being held, those participants may or may not be Old Farm members. They might be observers or they might be city staff. So simply going by participant numbers in a meeting has its own problems. And during a pandemic, if we wind up with 12 people watching, then that means 2 people can, call for a recall.
Well, why don't we just take a step back and say, what's reasonable to call for a recall? Is it 20 people? Is it 50 people? Is it 10 people?
Well, and that's why I go with the registered voters route, because that
It
allows
can't be
for
voters, though.
expansion.
It
I'm sorry?
could be somebody who owns a business.
Why not say registered residents? Instead of
We
vote-
don't have those numbers.
Well, that's why I'm saying if we just establish an absolute number, if we as a board say, well, if people get mad enough at us that 25 people sign, 25 people who are qualified to be OFDNA members sign a petition for the removal, that's enough. Doesn't matter how many registered voters we have, doesn't matter how many people came to the last meeting. The threshold that is reasonable to call for the removal of a board member is whatever number we think it is.
How about 50 qualified occupants?
I don't know. I'm looking at this with regards to expansion. When we have the Elbow and the Stevens Road tract coming online, when we have Easton filling in.
I agree with Kathy. We need to come up with an arbitrary number, but the words registered voters, that can't be in.
Well, registered voters is used in the Bend Code. That's the reason I referenced that, is that's already established as a guideline. It's not meant to be a discriminatory line, and in fact, it's a lower number than if we were to include all eligible citizens or all eligible persons. I'm sorry.
But a registered voter that has a business in the Old Farm District could also be a registered voter in another NA.
Right.
So, I mean.
No, so I misunderstood. I didn't read it carefully enough. What Eric is saying is that 10% of the registered voters establishes the threshold, but that isn't who needs to sign.
Exactly.
The people who need to sign is the number of qualified OFDNA members.
Right.
So Eric's perspective, and that's much, I'm sorry, I misread it. At first, I thought you were saying that registered voters had to sign, and that is definitely exclusionary. But if you're just using the number of registered voters to establish the benchmark,
right.
That feels like a large number, though.
That's like 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the whole thing is we just had 10% there, so I left 10%. We can make it like 2%, because I think if we're approximate, I can come back with hard figures next time around. But
yeah, that line needs work, and I don't know how it needs to be fixed.
Yeah,
I think we're picking nits.
So
that's what we're doing today, Dave. We're going through this, and we're supposed to be picky today.
I understand. However, we have never had 10% of any registered, unregistered, whatever, in any of our general meetings.
I agree.
Right, so that's why I think we should go with probably 2%. If we approximate 4,000 whatever.
That's still too much.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's how many people actually live here. There's, I think, like 4,000 to 6,000 people.
There are what, like there are like 4,000 doors.
Right.
So
So
you have
let's
to
say
assume-
10% of that is hundreds. 1% of that is tens. So if we say 2%, that would be like 80 people.
Well, maybe we think about it overnight and see, because if you're thinking, if your gut says 80 people is the right number, which I don't have enough experience here to know, then maybe we just say 80 people, because then you don't have to, and I understand that might need to be revised if we take a whole bunch more people in the elbow or whatever, but which I've never even figured out what the elbow is yet. But don't tell me right now, please. But I still think just having a round number is clearer. If anybody goes to want to do a recall, let's say somebody is really mad at me because of these remarks about immigrants who are not legally here. And they want to get me out. I've been in, and they want to get me out. And they look at this and I'm like, oh my God, now I got to go figure out how many registered voters are here to figure out whatever percentage we choose. This is really an onerous process. I wish they would just have specified a number.
My problem is that there are not enough people out there that give a shit.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, you know, whatever number that we approve is going to be more than any people that pay any attention to our bylaws.
Welcome to America.
Fair point.
Exactly. Make it 2% and screw it.
Sounds good.
So,
One more point. If you've got people, whatever number you have, you know, 3 people could go and get a lot of signatures. We don't even, who's going to be determining? And I think maybe we need to say who makes the determination that these people are from the neighborhood, that they didn't sneak in somebody from a block away that's no longer in the neighborhood, but it's a street that we recognize.
That's
We've
the
already
qualified member
said-
statement.
Wait, we've already said that there are no proxies. So I don't think that even counts.
So we'll move on from this. I'll do some better research on the numbers and population, number of voters and so on. We might just wind up saying 100 votes or 100 signatures and call it good.
That's great. I would love to see that 100 voters or even 25 would be in.
Yeah. So we'll move on from that now and we'll come back to that in December. A lot of this in the middle here stays the same. This is all basic stuff for any kind of organization, really. And
Boundaries.
Boundaries.
Here's the fun part.
This is what we're here for. So again, background. It misunderstood how the boundaries were established, referencing a council resolution recognizing the boundaries. That's not quite how it worked. There was a resolution that said the NAs do it themselves, and then the city approves the NA's application. So just procedurally, there's that. Then you can see the existing language here compared to what we're going to replace it with. So southern boundary, we're pretty much taking as Murphy Road down to Knott Road. So west of 15th, it's Murphy Road. East of 15th, it's Knott Road. And the urban growth boundary you can see is in our existing bylaws. That is a boundary that has been there since 2012 and even earlier, since the beginning. So the UGB has historically been used as a boundary line.
And historically, that whole part right there is why the old farm district got formed. It had to do with the development trying to build on the other side of the UGB at the time. And it turned out one of the, I think city councilors had a conflict of interest. So it became an even vote, so it got denied.
Yeah. So the northern boundary is effectively Reed Market. It might take a sec to pull up our existing map. But our existing boundaries, you can see, have this little triangle right here. That's the canal on the other side of 27th, out to the current city boundary. That little triangle is actually part of our current boundaries. So that's where I have this little for your consideration here, because it's not explicit. It's not entirely clear from the current description. I was trying to make that a little more clear in our.
How about this? To the eastern city limits as of November 9th, 2020.
I just said in a straight line from Reed Market in a straight line to the UGB.
Yeah, but the UGB now includes the DSL lands.
Yep, that's the idea.
Okay.
And if there's any concern about us acting outside of city limits, the fact that it's outside of city limits constrains our actions. So, I mean, that's
Well,
all there is to it.
historically, that was the purpose of the
Exactly.
old farm district.
Yeah, yeah. The
there's
western
precedent.
boundary is pretty clear. That is a developed area. That's not going to change. That's the Parkway and 3rd Street. The eastern boundary is simply the UGB. That's it.
Questions, anyone?
I like it.
And as you can see, that was just clarified by striking language. I didn't add the UGB there. That was there.
Good, I like it.
Yeah, and like I said, historically, it all has to do with the city last time got to vote the UGB expansion annexation, and then that changed. So this is very important when the NLA or NART or city staff starts saying, wait a minute, it shouldn't be this way. Well, it's this way for a reason.
Right.
Is there any way that we can get the notion of mentoring in here?
I don't think we should.
I don't think so. I think that's going to be a separate conversation in 5 to 10 years when we just have to revisit this and talk about redefining the boundaries smaller. And then once we reset our boundaries smaller, then the NA creation process comes into play, where a group of concerned citizens petitions the city with an application to take over this territory and creates the new NA.
That's a citywide issue.
Now that the NLA has established a subgroup to look at NA boundaries across the whole city, I think it is important to get the idea of mentoring into the conversation.
Honestly, I think that should be an NLA thing, because further down the line, there will be conversations about relinquishing territory. Some NAs might not want to split into two. Now, I think we all have the idea that that's the direction we just want to go because we're getting big and it might make sense. But how do you put, like that would be something like a sunset clause or something, like, you know, in 5 years, or how do you know when it's the right time? Because we have to define that time in the bylaws.
So we do that. All we have to do is have a sunset clause at the end of the bylaws after it's ratified that in 5 years they need to be reviewed. I mean, just hypothetically, or 7 years, these bylaws need to be reviewed. Let's not do a sunset clause on a specific article or item. We'll do it on the whole.
The thing is, I'm not sure how much legal force that would have, because if the sunset clause disappears, you still have the city authority. So you're just conducting an illegal action by revoking your bylaws without revoking the organization. So
as far as I know, city council can disband the NAs in a second.
By changing code, yeah. So that's what I think would eventually need to happen, honestly, is that city, once we hit a horizon there where it becomes necessary, then city will step in and say, okay, we're going to make sure this is done in an equitable fashion. So here's a committee that's going to do that, and there you go.
In the future,
I don't see why that has to be in our bylaws. I mean,
it doesn't.
the way it is.
In the future, the next UGB committee should be the ones coming up with those realities, not us.
Yeah.
They didn't do it in this last UGB expansion. And so now they're tasking us with something that they didn't want to mess with. So, obla-dee.
Yeah. So that makes sense to me. Were there any questions over any of that? We're at 8 o'clock now.
Great job. Really a good job.
So if that's the case, then Eric, we've got that one line to figure out some sort of a impeachment qualification.
Yeah, I'm gonna figure out the numbers that are relevant there and come up with some examples so that it can just be an informed thing that goes in the minutes so that people can refer back to, we had that conversation.
I say we do that, see if we get any comments.
Yeah, and then also the part that Kathy mentioned about organizations designating their voting member in advance.
Yes. Because for a long time we debated about only one vote per household, but then that's really not fair either, because you may have a household with 3 non-related people living in it, you know,
Sure.
or somebody with a spouse, or, you know, so that's just all sort of part of the challenge of it. So,
Okay.
any
sounds
other
good.
thoughts, board?
I'll submit that, and I'll try to include as much as possible in our minutes on this. And we'll have it online and in the next newsletter so everyone can review it.
And when's the next newsletter?
Before the next meeting, but I'll also be posting this to social media and the website and everything
Okay.
else too.
That's what I want to make sure. I don't want the NLA or city staff to come back and say we did all of this secretively. I want to say we had as much time as possible and we've done as much as we can. And that's, I know, Kathy, it is boring and it is dull, but I know Kim's going to read it.
I think it's dull myself personally. I mean, I'm one of those geeks, but I think when we redid it in Summit West, we got 0 interest. I mean, 0. So whatever.
It's
I
all
read
good.
it. I paid attention. I'm good.
Welcome aboard, Kathy.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Well, before we break this up, let's see, we had an item on here about preparing for council goal setting. We didn't get into that explicitly, though James mentioned it earlier. That's something I think we should think about and have as the main focus of our next meeting,
Yes.
because we want to get ahead of that conversation and we want to probably have some statements on our website, some public letters or whatever
So
that support some of our goal priorities.
So our newsletter should go out, I think, about 10 days before our meeting in December. We'll ask for comments, and then I'd even be up for doing a Facebook advertisement or some online thing, a few $100, see if we can get anyone to chime in. And then if we do, great. But then in December, we'll start working on that. I don't know, NA goals to be submitted to the city. Because we used to do it annually, and then the cities changed that, and that's why they formed the NLA. But each individual NA is allowed to have their own individual goals as well. So I think that's how we should do it.
So the only other thing I would say, I agree with you. I think the winds of change are blowing through the city council at about 100 miles per hour. It's very exciting. And I worked on the campaigns, so I do know those guys. But my question is, you know, given where we are in the city limits, another thing I would suggest that we should think about is there anything we want to talk to the county about? Because while the winds of change are not quite going, Phil Chang did get elected, and he is quite a different person than Phil Anderson, so who lives in RNA, as you know. So we should, if there's anything that's county focused, I also worked on that campaign. So I would be happy to think about if there are any things we should be bringing to the county as well.
We can present that, but before we go to county, we need to do a better job with the school district and the parks district. Because technically we're tasked as a city communications effort. That's I'm not discounting the idea, Kathy. It's just that when it comes down to where we are and who we get to yell at and get responses from, county doesn't have to listen. They
Well,
don't even have to open the email.
my
But,
input on that is that we can leverage our input towards the county through the city, as we're talking about land use and density. You know, Phil Henderson's big thing was right on the other side of that line, make some sprawl. If you don't like that, we can talk to the city and have them pass it on.
Could we also invite perhaps Phil Chang to a meeting?
At some point.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to get all the new city councilors. I know that you did the great meeting with them, but it'd be really fun. We'll get one as a liaison again, won't we?
Maybe.
Yes, Melanie Keebler actually lives within our boundaries and is probably a likely candidate for that.
Okay, because did Justin live within our boundaries as
Yeah.
well, or does?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, initially, then he moved out.
Yeah.
And he was
Oh.
also Century West's
Okay.
liaison. So, but once again, that's all up to the city council to decide whether or not they want to keep doing that. I don't see why they wouldn't. From what
Yeah.
I've gathered, it sounds like they want input from the NA. So,
Well, in January is when they typically make those committee and liaison assignments. So that's when we should know, sort of toward the end of January last year is when they did it.
Yep. And bringing this back around to the budget stuff at the beginning, that's the kind of stuff we can blow some budget on, is getting the word out, like bringing people to speak at our meetings and then getting the word out that you have availability to speak to these people through us. So
Is there one particular cause that we can bring together on? Because I think I mentioned this in an email that like it's a little bit fractured right now. And I think there would be good on us to find one cause that we could bring people together on. Maybe.
like people in general, or like
Just
Jan,
bring
user?
the city. I know there's a lot of people are discouraged about what's going on in this town. Like a lot of people just read the growth and then what has happened nationally and whatnot. And I think there right now there's a big call for some sort of unity and bringing people together for the same cause, or something to bring people together. I know that's
can
kind of
address
our
that.
job.
we can address that concept in the message that we're going to send for their.
Yeah, that, and just
But
as
that's
a
a tough
politics guy, I would like to focus some of that energy locally, and this is one way that we can do that. Like, if you're frustrated by what you see on TV nationally, you
Oh,
can
no,
have
I
an
mean,
impact
like,
here.
people, that's just the temperature, but we
Right,
are
right.
definitely focusing locally for sure.
So,
But
and
there's a lot of,
that's what I'm getting at, though, is like
Okay.
the goal setting thing there. That is where you can have the biggest impact, because that is the 2-year cycle that they're going to be building their budgets around. They're going to be setting their calendars based on that. When they
That's
say that,
totally
no, you
right.
can't do that, it's going to be because, like we asked them before, can we spend money about, what was it, planting seeds? The answer was no, because
Right.
that's not a part of our goals. So if we get that kind of stuff in the goals, then we can start doing it.
okay. All right,
So in the next 30 days, we can email each other, chat, and then whatever we come up with, we'll then put that in the December newsletter. Here's what we're thinking about telling city council. What are your thoughts? And I'm up for getting some A-frames mounted up.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts for the future of Bend, oldfarmbend.com, and leave those up for 2 weeks.
Do we have a survey, a history, a bunch of surveys? Have we surveyed people about their concerns over the past number of years here in this district?
We have the last 2 years, and this is actually the time that I need to get that rolling again. So I'll see if I can dig that up and pass that to the board. We might want to restructure how that's going, because it was a little bit long and the length discourages participation to some degree. But also, I don't know if there is.
Well, historically,
Especially
it was a
relevant.
lot of transportation issues.
Yeah.
And we just passed a big transportation bond, which is going to affect here. And that Reed Market thing is 10 years out if it happens.
It will
And,
never happen.
You said that to me, David. We'll see. We'll see.
it would take more than 35 million
Probably so.
just to buy the businesses
Yeah.
that are on
I know,
the
you said,
left-hand side
yeah,
going west.
We'll
So,
see.
going
And we
east.
know property values are going down every day.
Amen.
Well, the reason I brought up the survey, Eric, was not to give you another to-do on your extremely long list, apparently, but wondering if there is a way to leverage the past information. Oops, I have to go in just a second. But another way to leverage some of that information previously collected, in the last year or two is still pretty valid in terms of reflecting the concerns. And maybe there would be some things that when Jen reviewed it, she's like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what we could crystallize around. For me, if the thing that comes to my gut is just safety, neighborhood safety, neighborhood connectiveness. And, and safety is partly, like I said earlier in chat, getting somebody from our district on the bond committee so that we can advocate for the things that we care about, because that committee is going to have a lot to do with prioritizing the bond projects. But I think there are other things as well. So that's my 2 cents. Now I'm shutting up.
Kathy,
Yeah,
I
and honestly,
plan on
completely
applying
forgot
for
about
that.
So
bond.
we'll work on that next survey offline by email here.
So,
Is something like the piece of land that runs along 27th Street on the west side where there is no sidewalk and there's kids that walk to the middle school, and it's like I've said before, it's terrible to watch these kids trying to navigate the snow drifts where the plows have put all the snow on their way back from school when it's dark besides. I mean, that should be such a priority in this transportation bond
that
thing.
is,
And
that's one
I
of the
know
first
it's
5
there.
years.
Well, yeah, 5 years is 5 years too long. I mean, that
Well-
should have been done before is what I'm saying. And if they can push it up to the first year, I would like to see that pushed.
So that's just so everyone knows, there is no money for the first year. By the way,
No,
it
that's
had
right.
to be applied. So
That's right.
just
There's no money for projects, but the city of Bend has put aside a lot of engineering assessment money. So part of what they're going to be doing for the next 2 years is scoping and estimating project costs and things like that. So, if we squeak early, often, and in a polite and measured way, I think it's totally possible that we could get some worms.
And I
yes.
agree with you, Kathy. And
Wait, I really mixed that metaphor.
no, but that's okay. We understood where you are. And I absolutely agree with you. The squeaky wheel does get the grease usually. And I think that needs to be one of our areas of concern that are
High
at the
desert.
top of our list. It's so basic in safety.
You
Yes,
might
Jen.
be able to get High Desert Middle School PTA on board with being incredibly squeaky about that area. I've already heard from the PTA board there that is a huge concern.
Of course it is. Yeah,
Doesn't
that
make
would
a
be
lick of
great.
damn sense. It's crazy.
And Jen, like I told you, there's funds from other sources that can go to certain projects. The Safe Routes to School, the MPO still has dedicated funds, and that gets dished out annually, and it's not part of the city council's goal sessions. But there's 3 city councilors that sit on that board, and they get 1 vote. And that is all independent of the transportation bond. So
Okay.
there are other avenues, and it will not be part of the transportation committee. It will be part of paying attention to other meetings like the MPO, like Cascades East Transit. There's a lot of people that are writing grants right now based upon safety. It's amazing. So if we don't have anything else to say, I think we should wrap this meeting up, at least recording Facebook wise.
Okay,
Are we good?
Solid.
good.
All right, stop.